Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Shravanam Diaries Podcast.
Reading Bhagavad Gita as it is, the book by His Divine Grace Abhay Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Chapter 7, Knowledge of the Absolute. Text 29. Jara marana mokshaya mama shritya yatantiye te brahma tad viduh kritsnam adhyatmam karma chakhilam. Intelligent persons who are endeavoring for liberation from old age and death take refuge in me in devotional service. They're actually Brahman because they entirely know everything about transcendental activities. Purport: birth, death, old age, and diseases affect this material body, but not the spiritual body. There is no birth, death, old age, and disease for the spiritual body. So one who attains a spiritual body becomes one of the associates of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engages in eternal devotional service, is really liberated. So we're really liberated when we attain spiritual body and become one of the associates of the Lord. Aham Brahmasmi, I am spirit. It is said that one should understand that he is Brahman, spirit, soul. This Brahman conception of life is also in devotional service, as described in this verse. The pure devotees are transcendentally situated on the Brahman platform, and they know everything about transcendental activities. I like this. Transcendentally situated on Brahman platform, and they know everything about transcendental activities. Not that we are situated on Brahman platform and all we do is shine and merge. 4 kinds of impure devotees who engage themselves in the transcendental service of the Lord achieve their respective goals. And by the grace of the Supreme Lord, when they are fully Krishna conscious, they actually enjoy spiritual association with the Supreme Lord. But those who are worshippers of demigods never reach the Supreme Lord in His supreme planet. Even the less intelligent Brahman realized persons cannot reach the supreme planet of Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan. Only persons who perform activities in Krishna consciousness, Mam Ashritya, are actually entitled to be called Brahman, because they are actually endeavoring to reach the Krishna planet. So unless we're endeavoring to reach Krishna's planet, there's no question of being entitled to be called Brahman. Such persons have no misgivings about Krishna, and thus they are factually Brahman. I really like how here it's like there are people whom we call Brahmavadis. They're like all about Brahman. But here Prabhupada says that actually Brahmavadis are devotees of the Lord. Actually Vaishnavas are the real Brahmavadis because they are their goal is to reach Krishna. They know all about transcendental activities. They are actually factually Brahman. Or there are people who are called Shaktas. I think in Tattva Viveka, if if I'm not mistaken. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he establishes that actually we are the Shaktas because we worship the energy of the Lord in its like proper way. We're Hare Krishna, like we worship the energy of the Lord to engage us in the Lord's service. Actually, we're the Shaktas. So I really like this concept that everything good is already included in Krishna consciousness. Like if something is good, like you will never be missing out that something is there and it's not in Krishna consciousness. That's why, you have to choose. Basically, if you choose Krishna consciousness, you choose everything good that's there. And like all these conceptions, like I really find it very inspiring. Those who are engaged in worshipping the form or archa of the Lord, or who are engaged in meditation on the Lord simply for liberation from material bondage, also know, by the grace of the Lord, the purports of Brahman, Adhibhuta, etc., as explained by the Lord in the next chapter. Okay, we'll find out in the next chapter. Text 30. Sadhibhutadhi daivam mam sadhi yagyam cha ye viduh prayana kalepi cha mam te viduryukta chetasaha. Those in full consciousness of me, who know me, the Supreme Lord, to be the governing principle of the material creation, of the demigods, of all methods of sacrifice, can understand and know me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even at the time of death. Purport. Persons acting in Krishna consciousness are never deviated from the path of entirely understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you're acting in Krishna consciousness, you're never deviated from the path. In the transcendental association of Krishna consciousness, one can understand how the Supreme Lord is the governing principle of the material creation and even of the demigods. Gradually, by such transcendental association, one becomes convinced of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and at the time of death, such a Krishna conscious person can never forget Krishna. Naturally, he is thus promoted to the planet of the Supreme Lord, Galoka Vrindavan. This 7th chapter particularly explains how one can become a fully Krishna conscious person. The beginning of Krishna consciousness is association of persons who are Krishna conscious. Such association is spiritual and puts one directly in touch with the Supreme Lord, and by His grace one can understand Krishna to be the Supreme Lord, Supreme Personality of Godhead. At the same time, one can really understand the constitutional position of the living entity, and how the living entity forgets Krishna and becomes entangled in material activities. By gradual development of Krishna consciousness in good association, the living entity can understand that due to forgetfulness of Krishna, he has become conditioned by the laws of material nature. He can also understand that this human form of life is an opportunity to regain Krishna consciousness, and that it should be fully utilized to attain the causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord. So basically, whatever situation of life we have, whatever karma we have, whatever bad bargain we've received with our material body, with the present birth, it's an opportunity. This human form of life is an opportunity to regain Krishna consciousness. So we should be able to fully utilize it to attain causeless mercy of the Lord. Many subjects have been discussed in this chapter. The man in distress, the inquisitive man, the man in want of material necessities, knowledge of Brahman, knowledge of Paramatma, liberation from birth, death and diseases, and worship of the Supreme Lord. However, he who is actually elevated in Krishna consciousness does not care for the different processes. He simply directly engages himself in activities of Krishna consciousness, and thereby factually attains his constitutional position as an eternal servitor of Lord Krishna. In such a situation, he takes pleasure in hearing and glorifying the Supreme Lord in pure devotional service. He is convinced that by his doing so, all his objectives will be fulfilled. This determined faith is called Dridha Vrata, and it is the beginning of Bhakti Yoga, or transcendental loving service. That is the verdict of all scriptures. This 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is the substance of that conviction. Faith. Determined faith. Dridha Vrata. That's the beginning of Bhakti Yoga. Dridha Vrata. So in previous episodes, we've established that those who think that the Lord is formless, that he manifests from material nature, that Brahman is not Krishna, basically, they were unintelligent, they were defined as unintelligent. And here Krishna establishes, yesterday we've spoken about those who are engaged in devotional service with determination, and today it's established that such persons are intelligent, that they are taking refuge in Krishna in devotional service, that they are actually Brahman. They know everything about transcendental activities. And then the concluding verse of this chapter, because we have completed chapter 7, the concluding verse of this chapter is that those in full consciousness of Krishna, they understand that Krishna is the governing principle of the material manifestation, demigods, methods of sacrifices, and thus we can know Krishna even at the time of death. Jai, governing principle. Of all the material manifestation. I'm just trying to see, this time as I read, I'm trying to see the sequence of the Bhagavad Gita, because many times, I think the first time I've read Bhagavad Gita, I was 15, meaning like from cover to cover. I was 15, I started reading it on my own. Of course, the first time I attended a seminar on Bhagavad Gita in 3 days by Tomashloka Prabhu, nowadays known as Sagar Maharaj. I was like, 10 or 11, and basically I've known the Bhagavad Gita as what it is, but to read it from cover to cover is a personal experience that everybody has to have on their own. Everybody has their experience, the first experience of their Bhagavad Gita reading, right? Like my mom, she says that as soon as she read Bhagavad Gita, she was like, this is everything that I've been looking for, I surrender. That was her conviction. She was like, this is correct. This is my religion. That was her conviction. My dad, first he read all the translations. He didn't read the commentaries. He just read all the verses, and he was like, very, very nice. And then the second time he read the purports also. He's like, the purports are also very wonderful. That was his relationship with the Bhagavad Gita. The first time I read Bhagavad Gita, I wrote a song about it. And I wrote a song that, basically we've been in this material world and we're constantly dying and constantly basically running and chasing and crying and dying over and over again. And we turned away from the Lord. And this is all we found in this material world. And I just had this understanding that basically, material world is just not something that can really fulfill us at all. That was my understanding of Bhagavad Gita from the first time. But, it's never enough. After that, you can go on and you can think that, I've read Bhagavad Gita. But then you act in life, or you make decisions in life, or you look at life in certain way. And then second time I read Bhagavad Gita, when I was doing Bhakti Shastri, and then when I was doing the seminars at Bhaktivedanta Maharaj's, but it was not from cover to cover. It was selective portions of Bhagavad Gita. So now I'm nearing my 30s, and I'm reading Bhagavad Gita again from cover to cover, and I'm trying to see the sequence of Krishna's teachings. So in this chapter, it's interesting how Krishna first of all defined that he spoke about how he listed that it's out of many thousands of men, hardly one endeavors for perfection, hardly one knows me in truth. And he listed the material elements, established the two natures, then listed material elements. Then he said that I am the taste of water, I am the original fragrance of the earth. And I had I was in a bit of bewilderment, because I'm like, where is the rest of it? Where is I am the letter A? Where is of all the senses I am the mind? Where is that of all the aquatics I am the shark? And then I'm like, no, this is 10th chapter. Right. So Krishna, he established a few points. He is the original seed of existence and this and that. And then he immediately went, because it's not the time yet. And then he went into describing for miscreants, for miscreants and for pious men who surrender to him. Miscreants who never surrender, and pious men who do surrender. And then, after that, he established that all these devotees are magnanimous souls, who is in constant spiritual touch with him. But then he went into those whose intelligence has been stolen by material illusion, who worship demigods. And after demigods, he went to those who think that he is impersonal, that he is Brahman. And then he concluded this chapter establishing that basically, if you are really in Brahman, then you know transcendental activities, and then you take refuge in him, in Krishna. And then concluding verse of this chapter is that he is the governing principle of all the material manifestation. And that is knowledge of the absolute. Wow. Okay, so tomorrow we shall start chapter 8, attaining the supreme. And Arjuna inquires from the first verse. He asks, what is the self? What is all this? What are fruitive activities? What is the self? What is Brahman? What are the demigods? Very interesting. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in today. The book links Previous episodes timeline and biography of the author can be found on shravanamdiaries.com. The link is in the description, and we shall see you tomorrow. Hare Krishna.